Today we're going to talk about calibrating a CRT TV or monitor. I'll go over the hardware and software that we need first, and then we'll walk through the entire calibration process from start to finish. I'll get everything set up and show you how I'm doing it. We'll go through. I won't do any cuts or anything like that, so that section may be a little bit long, but I think it's important that you see every part of that process. At the end of the video, once we're done with calibration, I want to talk about the methodology and reasoning behind what we're doing. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that you're going to need is a colorimeter, and this is sort of the crux of this entire process. The colorimeter is a sensor that you're going to lay in front of the tube. It'll actually sit on the screen itself, and it has a little sensor that's going to detect the light coming off of the screen. It's going to feed that back into your PC via USB, and a program is going to tell you whether or not you have enough red, green, or blue light coming into that image. As far as which colorimeter to get, if you look on Amazon or eBay for a colorimeter, you're going to see a million different models and a few different brands. However, there are only a few that are going to work with CRTs. These other ones aren't necessarily bad products, but some of them were built with organic sensors that have degraded over time and just won't work anymore. I have a list in the description below, as well as showing on the screen right now, of all of the colorimeters that I can confirm will work with the software that we're going to use and will work with a CRT monitor. The cheapest one is usually going to be the Colormunki display. That's the one that I have. And the most expensive ones are going to be the ones that say plus in the name. The main difference between these models, as you get into the more expensive ones, is on the lower end of the light spectrum. So when we're calibrating for a dim or dark image, it'll scan a little bit faster. So with the Colormunki, it'll take maybe 3 or 4 seconds to scan. With the higher end ones, it might take half a second or 1 second to scan. The other big difference is that all of the models only support up to 1000 nits, which a CRT will never get to or should never get to. If you get your CRT to 1000 nits, you're doing something wrong. However, if you want to use this to calibrate an OLED, a newer OLED TV that gets above 1000 nits, you'll need the plus models. But if you're just worried about CRTs, any of these models will work. Another thing I would suggest getting along with the colorimeter is a USB extension cable. So I bought a 4-meter long USB 3 extension cable. It doesn't have to be USB 3, but I just felt a little better about the build quality because this sensor only comes with a 3 or 4 foot long USB cable, and it needs to sit on the front of your CRT and plug into your PC. So keep in mind how far away those two things might be from each other. If you have a laptop, you obviously don't have to worry about it, but if you have a desktop, you may need to run it across the entire room, 2 or 3 meters. So just make sure you get a long enough extension cable. The second part that we need for hardware, so the colorimeter is the first part, the second part that we need is an actual source that we plug into our monitor that's going to display the test pattern that we need. There are plenty of different ways we can generate this image. Some of them are much better and more reliable and more accurate than others. The most accurate, the number one, is going to be the Extron VTG 400. The issue with this is that this thing costs $300 or more on eBay. This is a professional calibration device that would have been used back in the day to calibrate CRTs in movie studios and things of that nature. And while it's, 1/10 of the price that it was when it first came out, it's still way more expensive than what most people are willing to pay. So keep that in mind that that thing exists, and if you don't care about money, go ahead and buy one, but there are acceptable alternatives to this that are way cheaper. So let's talk about some of those. So on the second level below the VTG 400 would be a Nintendo Wii or a Dreamcast or a PS2. Depending on the type of signal you're trying to calibrate for, you may want to use one or the other of these. So the Wii is known to have an incredible component output. The Dreamcast is known to have really incredible composite output when it comes to accuracy. The PS2 has good component output and can be used in conjunction with the free CalRec 601 DVD. That DVD is a calibration DVD that you can put into any DVD player and use it for this process. However, the PS2 is the only one of these DVD players that is completely accurate and well known to be accurate. So that's why it's on the same level as those other two consoles. You may want to calibrate for S-Video or for RGB as well, and you can tell that I didn't mention S-Video or RGB on anything in that console list. That's because these levels have not been tested with the VTG 400 as a comparison to see just how accurate they are. However, in my sort of preliminary opinion, looking through and seeing how my calibrations look, I think I'm comfortable in saying if you need to calibrate with RGB and you don't have any other choice, you can use the RGB output of the Wii, of the Dreamcast, or of the PS2. And then finally, right below all of that, we have just any DVD player. So you get one from a reputable brand like Sony or JVC, and you can use that in conjunction with the free CalRec DVD to calibrate via whatever output you want from that DVD player. However, because there are so many quality levels and models of DVD player, even just from the same company, so Sony made cheaper DVD players and they made really expensive nice ones, and we don't have a comprehensive list of all of these and how accurate all of their readings are. So the DVD player is sort of a last-ditch effort for if you don't have anything else that I've listed so far and you don't want to spend any money on those devices. So that's what we need as far as the hardware is concerned. We need the colorimeter, I'll be using the Colormunki display, and we need a source. I'll be using a Sega Dreamcast, and I'm going to be calibrating through RGB, which I mentioned hasn't been fully tested, but it's certainly better than not having any calibration at all. As far as the software is concerned, we need a program running on our computer, and we need a piece of software running on our game consoles, or we need that DVD. So the piece of software we need on our computer is HCFR. If you Google HCFR download, you'll find a SourceForge link and you'll find a GitHub link. I suggest using the SourceForge link because the GitHub version actually took away some features from the SourceForge version. I'll have the link to the download in the description below though, so you don't actually have to look around for it. The other piece of software that we need is 240p Test Suite if we're using the Wii or the Dreamcast. So that is a piece of homebrew software. You have to get it on your Wii or Dreamcast however you want to get homebrew on there, whether it's through an optical drive emulator or hacking a Wii, which hacked Wiis are very easy to get. It's very easy to do. So just consider that you have to get this homebrew running somehow on those devices. Or you need the free CalRec 601 DVD, which I'll have linked in the description, and that can be used in conjunction with the PS2 or the DVD player. I'm going to be using the Dreamcast version of 240p Test Suite, and it is exactly the same as the Wii version as far as the test that we're going to open up. So some of the settings in the menu, in the very first menu that you see, are different, some of the options you have, but once we get into the test that we're going to do, the buttons are the same, the controls are the same. It's a universal piece of homebrew software that sort of acts the same on every console. With all that being said, let's get into the actual sensor being set up. We'll get my CRT turned on and we will start the calibration process from scratch. Here we are in HCFR. We have that loaded up over here. I also have my monitor over here running... Oh, where's my hand? Where's my hand? Oh, there we go. Running 240p Test Suite on the Dreamcast. The first thing that we need to consider is what point we're going to calibrate to. So we have two different options, realistically. We have D65 or D93. And you may be wondering what those are. D65 targets 6500K as a white point, and D93 targets 9300K. You may be wondering, what does that number even mean? Well, if you ever bought light bulbs and you've seen on the front of the package, they'll tell you what the white point is that those bulbs are at, or what color temperature those bulbs are at. So if you buy daylight bulbs, they'll be at, 6,500 or something like that. If you buy warm bulbs, they might be at 4,000. So that temperature, the color temperature, that number, the higher you go, the more blue it is, the lower you go, the more orange it is. So how do you decide between 65 or 93? Well, in North America and in Europe, it was D65 as the standard for the AV industry. So for movie production and anything like that, anywhere where there were monitors being calibrated, they were calibrated to D65. In Japan, they were calibrated to D93, so they had a much more blue white point and a much more blue image on their CRTs than we did. So typically speaking, you'd probably want to go for D65, but some people really enjoy the look of D93. And if you have a PVM, you'll actually be able to set up both of these on the PVM. Every PVM I've seen, or at least for the most part, has both of these as options built in. So if I go into this Panasonic PVM right here, you can see that it actually has profiles for 9300K, or 6500K, and a user profile, which is able to be set to whatever you basically want it to. So usually you'll calibrate these two on the PVM, you'll ignore the user setting and just go with whatever it says over here. I wanted to zoom in a little more so you can see this better, this text here, and see the changes in the color. So you can see I'm set to 65 right now, and if I go to 93, you can see just how much more blue the image is, and these are both calibrated already. But when you first get a PVM or BVM, you'll definitely want to recalibrate these settings because they're probably not accurate anymore. Over time, with any CRT, even if it was perfect out of the factory, it's slowly going to lose its calibration because of the way analog components work. Today I'm going to use the user preset on my PVM as a sort of blank slate, and we're going to target D93. So let's go ahead and do that. Now we can get started in HCFR. So we're going to target D93 today, but the process for all of this is the same if you're targeting D65. So let's go into the new button right here. It'll ask us to select a generator from the list. We're going to do DVD manual. It's going to tell us to pick a sensor. We're going to pick our Colormunki display right here and just click finish. We're going to select our display type here from this drop down. It's a refresh display. That's for a CRT. We can click OK. And here we are. We're in the program now. Your view may look slightly different than mine. I have some different charts pulled up here. This RGB gamma one. We have a bunch of really important sections. This top one here is where a lot of our calibration numbers are going to come from. And this little area right here with these 4 bars is probably the absolute most important part. This is where all of the color calibration is going to be referenced. To begin with, we have a few settings we need to change in HCFR. We're going to go to this advanced menu right at the top. We're going to go down to preferences. We are going to go to the references section here and change this to an SD TV, standard definition TV. We're going to check change white point. You can see by default for SDTV, it's D65. That's because that's the most common one. And you can see the white point matches exactly. We're going to change ours to D93. These other ones here never really got used, especially not in the CRT world. 65 and 93 are your go-tos. We're going to set up everything the way I have here. We're going to override black. That means we're not going to take a measurement at 0 nits. That's because the CRT, much like an OLED, is not going to display anything when there's pure black being shown. So set these up here to match what I have. We're going to go to the advanced tab here, check this box if it's not checked already, and change these settings to match the ones that I have here. You're going to click apply and then OK. And now we should be set up to start calibrating. So we're going to take our sensor and we're going to put it right in the middle of the screen. And we're going to take the weight on the other side of it and drape it over the other side of the CRT so this stays in place. So you're going to balance this right in the middle of the screen. And in 240p test suite, we're going to go to the 100 IRE test pattern. In order to do that, we're going to go to test patterns. We're going to go to the color and then 100 IRE. And here we are. So we have our white square, our sensor is in the middle of it. I can use the triggers or the D-pad to go left and right, and you can see it's changing the IRE level right down at the bottom. And if you're on the Dreamcast, and this only applies to the Dreamcast, you're going to want to press the Y button to set that 700 millivolt setting. So if I press it again, you see it says 800. I'll press it one more time, and it sets it to 700. That's what we want or calibration. That only applies to the Dreamcast, but it is important. Now that we have this set up, we want to turn off our lights. You want to do this in as dark of a room as possible. If you have blackout curtains or a basement with no windows, you'll want to do your calibration there. Or if you have to do it in a room with windows, you'll want to wait until nighttime and turn off all of your lights. So I'm going to turn off my light. Now we are in a pitch black room. The first thing that we want to do is set the brightness and the contrast. So that's going to be essentially the black point and the white point of our CRT. The way that we do this, first off, set yourself to the 100 IRE pattern. We're already set there. You're going to click on the 100 IRE sensor level right here. That's the percent white. Click on 100. And you're going to click on the play button right here. And you can see that is taking scans continuously of my screen. Every so often this is going to flicker and it's going to update. The important numbers here are the capital Y, that is the nits, the nit level, the brightness level that you're at. The delta E is the average difference between the red, green, and blue levels. This number needs to be at 2.0 or below to be considered calibrated. We also have the Y target down here, which is the brightness level that all of these other numbers are supposed to be at. This target is drawn from your nit level at 100 IRE. So as this number changes, as we dim this down or brighten this, all of these target numbers are going to change because at different levels they should be different brightnesses. Typically, 120 nits is considered acceptable for a consumer CRT. Professional CRTs like PVMs and BVMs will have numbers in their service manual that they tell you to target. Some of them tell you to target 100, 90, or even 80 nits because they're meant to be used in a dark room. So the lower this number goes, the darker the CRT is going to be. It's going to be harder to see in a bright room. But you shouldn't be using a CRT in a bright room. They should be used in a room with the lights dimmed, the windows closed, or the lights off completely. For my unit, I'm going to target 100 nits because I play in a dark room. And if I set my CRT to 120 nits in my dark room and a full white screen comes up like the transitions in Legend of Dragoon, for example, it will burn your eyes out. It is so damn bright. 120 nits doesn't sound like a lot, but trust me, when the lights are off, you need sunglasses when a white screen pops up. So how do we actually change that? You'll want to have the service manual on hand with you. So you Google the model number of your set, followed by service manual, and manuals library, manuals lib, usually has all of the service manuals you could possibly want on there. You'll open that up and see what different service settings you have. On my set, I'm going to go into the menu. I'm going to go into the picture reference, and you can see I have contrast and brightness. So which one of these are we supposed to change? Well, contrast needs to be changed to make the highest end of your CRT brightness change. So what I mean by that is when you have the really bright white square, adjusting the contrast is going to adjust how bright that square is or how many nits it's putting out. We're going to go down to a darker square later on, and that's what we're going to use the brightness for. The brightness takes the black level and raises it up, so it's the darkest point of your CRT that could possibly be shown. Typically, we think of brightness and contrast as meaning the opposite of what they mean on a CRT, so it can be very confusing. But just know, for this level right now, I'm going to go to the contrast because we're adjusting 100 nits. I know that I want to target 100, so I'm going to go in here. I'm going to start lowering it. You can see that number changing. Lower it by one more. There we go. We're at 99.3, which is as close as we're going to be able to get to 100. Oh, you can see it's actually starting to go down, up and around because we have an analog TV. These numbers are going to constantly be changing just a little bit. So just get it as close as you can. So I'm going to click this X to stop the tests. Now I'm going to click on the 20 IRE pattern. I'm going to set my Dreamcast down to 20 IRE. There we go. And now I'm going to click the play button again. And now you can see this Y target is telling us what we need this number to be up here. So because we set this to 100 nits, our target brightness or 20 IRE is 2.483. So we want to get as close as we can. But remember, the contrast over here should only be updated for the brightest level. We want to adjust the darkest level, so we want to go into brightness. Now we're in the brightness menu. I'm going to let it scan a couple of times because I had the menu pulled up, and that obviously affected what this sensor was seeing because it had all that bright text showing. So now it tells me I'm at 3.5 nits. I'm going to go down on brightness. I'm going to let it scan because at these darker levels, it takes a very long time to scan. There we go. So we're at 2.483 almost exactly, which is pretty crazy. But we shouldn't celebrate yet. I'm going to stop the test and go back up to 100 nits on the sensor, or on the Dreamcast. I'm going to hit play on this, and you're going to see or my contrast level dropped, because everything you do on the CRT, whether it's brightness, contrast, or the different color levels, anything that you touch is going to affect all of the other numbers. So there's a lot of bouncing back and forth that's constantly happening. Let's go ahead and increase our contrast. And there we go, we're back to 99, 98. So that's as good as we're gonna get right there. I'll stop this, go back down, hit play. So we're at 2.6 now. I'm gonna lower the brightness by just 1 and see if that gets us there. The problem is at 20 nits, these adjustments just going down by 1, you can see how much it affected it. So it's a lot more drastic, the changes on these. And on a consumer set, you're gonna have even wider gaps. So let's say your contrast is set to 50 out of 100. Usually consumer CRTs, you get 0 to 100 for your settings, so you set it to the default of 50, and you go down by 1 and you lose like 5 nits just from going from 50 to 49%. So the PVM controls are much more precise. Keep that in mind. So 2.4 is pretty darn good. We're going to go back to 100 and just check one more time. We're at 97, so let's go ahead and change this. There we go. Go back to the brightness, stop the test, go back down to 20 IRE, and we are exactly where we need to be. So I'm going to stop now. We're pretty much done with this. This is as close as we're going to get with all these numbers. Okay. Now that we've done the brightness and the contrast, we can start with the colors. You can see my colors are way off here. I got red all over the place. Nobody likes me. Girls won't talk to me. It's just a sad situation to be in. So let's fix that. My phone died, which is also what I use for my camera. So we're going to have to deal with that. But when we were calibrating our brightness and contrast, we used 100 IRE for contrast, and we used 20 for the brightness. That's because 100 is the highest amount of brightness that we can go to, so we know where our target's going to be, and 20 is the most accurate, dimmest setting that we can go to. We could go to 10, which is dimmer, but it's a lot more finicky than 20 is, so that's why we targeted that. When we're calibrating color, instead of using 20 and 100, we're going to use 20 and 80. This is because when we calibrate the color at 80 IRE, anything to the left and right of it is going to be slightly off from 80. It's just the way that analog signals work. It's the way this calibration works. Nothing is going to be perfect, but we need to select a bright point and a dark point because of the way that calibration settings work. The same way we had contrast for the 100 IRE pattern, we have the red, green, and blue gain settings for 80 IRE. So those are the high end of the red, green, and blue colors. And just like we had brightness to adjust the 20 IRE setting, we have red, green, and blue bias to adjust the low end of the red, green, and blue settings. So we're adjusting two different things for these two different patterns, just like with 120 for the brightness and contrast. Your red, green, and blue bias may be called something else for the low end. It may be called red, green, and blue cutoff. It may be called background. So just keep in mind, if you look at your service manual, it'll tell you that you'll have a red, green, and blue gain, and then a red, green, and blue something else. And it'll be one of those three that I said, and that'll be for your dark settings. Let's go ahead and start the calibration process with our 80 IRE pattern. Just like we did with the 100 and the 20 IRE patterns, we need to go up to 80. I need to hit the play button, and it's going to start scanning. And you can see that our colors are way off. We have this big red thing telling us that we suck at life, and we have these bars that are supposed to all be matching. We have them all over the place. How do we fix this? Well, in the service menu of our CRT, we need to find our red, green, and blue gain settings. On my CRT, you can see I only have red and blue. Now, why would that be the case? One of our colors needs to be used as a reference level, meaning we never touch that color no matter what. We always adjust the other two colors. That way we have a baseline that we're adjusting towards, and we can make them all match. In the service manual of your CRT, it'll tell you which one of those you should use as a base color, or if you look in your CRT settings and you see one of the colors is missing from those adjustments, you'll know that that's supposed to be your reference level. On 95% of sets, green is your reference level. Green has the most effect on brightness and contrast when you change it. It is the most volatile of these colors, and you really do not want to adjust it from the factory defaults. On a few Sony consumer sets and on Ikegami brand PVMs, they actually use red as the reference level, and you'll see that in the settings or the service manual of those. So you'll have to be careful, but 95% of the time, green is your reference level. That means I am never going to touch green. Now on this set here, it doesn't even let me touch green, but on the Sony PVM right below it, it does let me touch green, but I just shouldn't ever touch it. So I have my red gain, blue gain, bias down here. Gain, remember, is for the high end, so right now, if I'm looking at this 80 IRE pattern, well, let me get out of the menu because we want to do an accurate scan. You can see it's telling me I have way too much red. Remember, we're trying to match whatever number this green one says. This green one may not always say 100%, but as you get these numbers closer, everything will start to say 100%. So let me just show you how that works. I'm going to adjust red, and you're going to see that the blue and green will react to this adjustment as well. Let's go ahead and turn red down. There we go. We have these pretty close. Now that we have these close, let's go ahead and go to our blue gain. We need to turn that up. Now you can see we still need a little more red. I'll go and change that. There we go. This delta E number needs to be below 2.0. You can see we got it to exactly 0. If you're on a consumer set, this is going to be a difficult or even impossible task to get down this low. Any number below 2.0 is acceptable. Do not kill yourself or beat yourself up over trying to do this. Don't spend 20 hours trying to get this low. This is because I'm on a PVM and it happens to be a pretty darn good one. But on most sets, if you can just get below 2.0, take the win while you can. Now that I have 80 set up, I'm going to stop the testing and we're going to go down to 20. We're going to start scanning at 20. And you're going to see a few things happen here. First off, my brightness has changed completely because we adjusted the colors, and my colors are way off over here. Let's go ahead and adjust those. Now I need to use my bias for red and blue, but you can see the blue was the only one that was having issues, and it's having a lot of issues. Let's go way down on this. There we go. Let's go back to our red. See what's going on with the red. I'm going to let it scan a couple times. And it wants us to give a little more red, so let's do that. Now the adjustments you make at 20 IRE, again, just like with the brightness levels, they are going to be much more drastic than at 80 IRE. And in fact, getting this number accurate is significantly harder than getting the 80 IRE accurate. Even on a PVM, I'll take any number under 2.0 and be very happy with it. In fact, I'm very happy with this 0.3 or 0.5 that it's at right now. Every time it scans, these numbers are going to fluctuate wildly. That's just how it is at the lower brightness levels. My brightness level is a lot more in line with the target now. Let's go back to 80 IRE because all of these numbers are now going to have changed. So here we are at 80 IRE, and now my colors are off again. I'm still under 2.0, which is good, but we can make this better. And now I'm going to stop scanning, and we're going to go back to 20. Stop the test, back, and you just go back and forth, and we keep doing this, back and forth. I'm going to go back up to 80, and if it's below 2.0 still, and if it's below 0.5 and I don't see anything crazy, just wants a little more blue, I'm going to make this blue adjustment, and then I'm going to stop. Because I know from experience that we are as close as we're going to get. So now we're done with our 80 IRE, we're done with our 20 IRE. We need to go back into our contrast and go back to the 100 IRE test and make sure we're still at 100 nits. And you can see we're not, we went up a little bit. So remember what I said, anything you adjust is going to affect everything else. So we did that, let's go back down to 20. But you can see we are as good as we're going to get with those two numbers. Now we want to go ahead and check all of the levels and make sure that the entire test is accurate, that our full sweep is accurate. So we're going to do a full gray sweep. What that means is that we're going to go down to 10 IRE, we're going to press this button right here, and it's going to take us through one at a time every single one of these steps. Now 90 is way off because I touched it by accident earlier. Yours is probably still going to be blank, so just ignore that. Let's click this. It's going to say, hey, we're going to run this on 11 values. Do you want to do that? And you're going to say yes. And it's going to say, hey, set your video to 10% and press OK. So what I'm going to do is actually get out of the menu completely so I don't have the UI affecting anything. And it's on 10 IRE right now. I know it's really hard to see because it's really dark, but I'm going to click OK. And it's going to take 4 or 5 seconds to scan this. And then another pop-up is going to come up. And it's telling me to go to 20. Here we are at 20 IRE, and I'm going to hit OK. Now, go up again. The 30 IRE. All of these numbers here are green. We're all below 2.0. And you can see what I was talking about earlier. Our 80 and our 20 are accurate, but as we get further away from them, these are going to go all over the place, and there's not much you can do about it. Also, depending on your source, these may have different types of weirdness in the middle, like this little gap right here. This could be due to the Dreamcast RGB output. But the point is, all of these numbers are in the green, they're all below 2, and most of them are below 1, which is really good. So once you get to this point here, you're done. You are calibrated at whatever temperature you picked. From here, we can go ahead and enjoy our CRT at whatever setting we set it to. Or if you have a PVM, you can now switch your profile over to D9 or D65, go in here and change this white point back and calibrate D65, so you can easily swap profiles. So now I'm calibrated, if I go to my color temp, between these two color profiles. And that's it. We are done with the calibration. Now we have a lot that I want to talk about that has to do with the calibration, but I didn't want to lead with it because I think most people just want that basic part done. But there's a lot in regards to PVMs, consumer sets, and the methodology that we used here that I think is important that we talk about. First, if you have a consumer TV set, I want to talk about getting into these service menus and making these changes we talked about. You'll need to look up the service manual for the specific set that you're using. There's a very good chance that you'll need the official remote that came with your TV. Every CRT that I've owned has needed its OEM remote for this to work. However, I've also never had trouble finding them on eBay for $10 or less. It's nice to have for other reasons as well, but a lot of the time you'll need that remote to get into the service menu and make these changes. You'll also want that service manual to look at what your settings are called. They call them all kinds of crazy weird things for some reason, but gain, bias, contrast, and brightness are pretty universal. If you have a PVM, it's important to note that you'll have controls on the front of them that adjust these things like contrast and brightness. However, you do not want to use those for this calibration unless you have to. So really old PVMs don't have a digital service menu like the one we went through today, but most of them that you'll find do have that service menu. The knobs on the front only come into effect when you have the user profile selected on a PVM. So you saw we had 6500, 9300, and user as the 3 different profiles. If I crank those knobs in all kinds of different directions on the 65 and 9300 settings, they're not going to do anything. And as soon as I switch over to user and start messing with them, you'll see the changes. At the end of the day, you really want all of those knobs to be centered out completely, and then make all of your adjustments to all 3 of those profiles via the software menu. The calibration we did is going to get you 90% of the way there to a really, really well calibrated CRT. That other 10% comes from following exactly what your service manual says as far as calibration is concerned, and it may also involve an oscilloscope, so that's why we're doing it the way we are. It is much simpler than going through that service manual, which is going to be different for every single set. The calibration that we just did was on the RGB input of my PVM. We also, if we're going to use the other inputs, would need to calibrate to those. So if I'm using Composite, if I'm using S-Video, I need to calibrate those in addition with a Composite or S-Video source. However, if you're like me and your entire setup only uses a single type of input, whether that's component, RGB, or whatever, you only need to calibrate for that one type of input. Almost every CRT bases calibration levels off of a single type of input. On some JVC TVs, they actually want you to calibrate the RF input first with a test pattern generator, and then you calibrate Composite, and then S-Video, and then component. And all of those other calibration numbers will be based off that initial RF input calibration. However, if you're only ever going to use the component input, I personally do not think it is worth the time to go through and calibrate all of those other inputs. Because if you calibrate only the component input and the calibration levels are correct, that means everything you see through that input is going to be correct, even if the other inputs are off. You've calibrated that one input, so I don't think it's worth wasting the extra few hours to do all of that. Now you can if you want to, of course, but read your service manual and see exactly how they want you to calibrate it if you're going to go through with that process. With my way, it's just on the fly, calibrate the one input, and you're good to go. If you want to see an extremely detailed and very deep guide on how to do all of this calibration, including all of the stuff with scopes and color theory and things like that, you can look up the CRT Calibration Guide playlist by Dan Mons on YouTube, who goes by the username StickFreaks. So look that up and you can see multiple hour-long explanations of all of the theory and things like that. But this is just a basic guide and it will get you most of the way there, and it's going to look way better than what you already have on your CRT. There's likely to be people saying, oh, this isn't the proper way to calibrate, you need to get the scope out, you need to do this and that, you need the VTG 400 for accurate readings, and I completely disagree with that. Your CRT right now is likely uncalibrated, or the last time it was calibrated was in the year 2000 or 1995. Anything you do to calibrate that CRT is going to look way better than whatever you've seen before, especially if you've had that CRT for years and years and never calibrated it. Your mind is going to be blown with how accurate all of the colors are. Let me give you an absolutely terrible metaphor to destroy my video with. If you've only ever had frozen, pre-made pizza for your entire life, that's all you've ever had, I could go start a farm, get tomatoes, get all these ingredients, grow them myself, make my own dough from scratch with wheat and flour that I grew myself. Or I could go to the grocery store and buy a pre-made sauce, a pre-made dough, buy the cheese that they have there, and make a pizza with that. If I give you a slice from both of those pizzas and all you've ever had is the pre-made frozen stuff, either way, your mind's going to be blown. You're going to go, damn, I have two great pieces of pizza in front of me. I love both of these. You're not going to go, well, this one was, farmed by hand and all this stuff, and this one was made in the grocery store. You're going to be happy because both of them are way better than anything you've ever had. And that's the point of this. I am okay with the grocery store, ingredient pizza that I made myself. I still feel good about it. I still had fun calibrating. I like going through these numbers. It's a very fun process. It can be a little aggravating on the lower end sometimes, but with this Panasonic we just did, I personally had a great time. It's so satisfying seeing how terrible all of these numbers are and how off your whites and blues and greens are, and then all of a sudden things just snap into place as you keep going on, and you play a game for the first time on the calibrated set, and it is a beautiful thing. So I really suggest just going through this process, and if you want any more information, look up Dan Mon's guide. It has everything you could possibly ever need to calibrate a CRT. One last thing that I'll mention that's only going to apply to like 1% of the people watching this. If you have a multi-format set, such as a PVM 14L5 or a 20L5 that supports 480i, 480p, 720p, and 1080i, each one of those resolutions needs to be individually calibrated. So even if I'm just using the RGB input, if I have a PS2 that's going to be showing 480p or something along those lines, I need to pull up a test pattern at that resolution and calibrate for that as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Just like how you have to calibrate all the inputs individually, you also have to calibrate the resolutions differently. I think that's everything I want to go over for this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you have any issues with the software or anything, I'll do my best to help. And I have plenty of people I can reach out to if I don't know the answer to something. So just let me know down there. Otherwise, happy calibrating and bye-bye.